Good afternoon, precious family. Welcome to another beautiful Saturday evening with inspirational moments with Precious Pair on the inspiration of the Precious Pair. As usual, when we bring our guests on, we bring people that add value, not just to the society we live in, but where from people that we can actually learn one or two things from. So for today, we've got our guest as usual. But as usual, I've got my lovely lady Tolu, who will do the introduction of our beautiful guest before we start um, asking him some questions. Tolu, over to you.
Thanks, Liz, and thanks everyone for joining us this evening. So we have, as Liz said, we have a lovely guest with us today who's going to impact some knowledge about COVID vaccines. He has, he's, he's highly specialized, and we're really blessed to have him join us this evening. So thanks so much for coming. I'll just do a little bit of introduction about who our guest speaker is. I'll be reading it, so don't mind me if I keep looking down and keep looking up for a bit. Okay, so we have Dr. Oginni here this evening. Thank you so much, Dr. Oginni, Dr. Leye Oginni. So who is Dr. Leye? He is a general practitioner that comes with a broad range of clinical and managerial experience in primary care. In the UK. He has previously worked as a GP partner and a GP trainer in Lincolnshire for many years before moving to London, where he has developed a broad range of clinical experience, including working in emergency medicine as a forensic medical practitioner and as a GP in urgent care. His current role is as a clinical director in a leading provider of urgent care in London. He's an experienced clinical leader, providing line management for the clinical team, and he has a keen interest in clinical governance, quality improvement, service development, and continuous postgraduate education. Dr. Oginni's expertise includes clinical pathway design, and this is evidenced by his recent work on the pathway design for the community COVID management service in the Southeast area of London, covered by the UTC service under his clinical directorship. In 2019, at the NHS, at 70 Excellence Awards organized by the Nigerian Health Professional UK, was among the awardees of the 70 most outstanding Nigerian healthcare professionals in the UK. Last year was awarded a recognition in the Pulse GP magazine as one of the 50 unsung heroes of 2020 in England. He's a Christian, is married and blessed with 3 children. So that in a nutshell is Dr. Oginni. So thank you so much once again, Dr. Leye Oginni, for coming to join us this evening. It's a privilege to have you here with us, and we do not take it for granted that we know you're a busy person, and we're grateful that you've taken time out of your busy schedule to come and join us and talk to us this evening. So thank you.
Thank you very
Over
much.
to you, Liz.
Okay.
This is not business as usual. Welcome, Dr. Leye Oginni, and thank you for coming as Tolu has also welcomed you. This is not business as usual for everyone that's watched us. We normally ask questions and they give answers, but this time around, we're going to give Dr. Leye, time to actually present to us because we're talking about the COVID vaccine. We're busting the myths around the COVID vaccine that people say so many things about it. We've seen some videos, untrue videos flying around as well, and so many rumors as well. So we're going to give Dr. Leye Oginni some time to actually share with us the various vaccines we've got, what's in it, what they do and stuff like that. Over to you, Dr. Leye.
Thank you very much, Lizzie, and thank you, Tolu, for the introduction and for the opportunity to present to our guests this afternoon. I will try and make it as interactive as possible so that people can ask the questions they want to ask. So I'll keep the presentation relatively brief in the beginning so that we have more opportunities to ask questions in the end. Before we go into the vaccination itself or the vaccine, we probably need to just take a look at the background of how we got to where we are. with COVID and why we think the vaccination is important. If we look at figures all around the world, it's about 115 million people that are said to have been infected with COVID-19. And here in the UK, we have over 4 million people infected. And as at 1st of March, we have had over 123,000 deaths. So these are lots of families, individuals that have been involved and have had their lives shattered and irreversible. The effect on the individual extends to the effect on the family, and it extends to an effect on the society at large. So while we look at figures, we only usually focus on figures of deaths, figures of people diagnosed with the condition. But let's take a look at the effect on the society, the effect on the community at large. So it's affected schooling for children, it's affected things like travel, is affected hospitality, and the effect on the financial market cannot be, overemphasized. So in UK alone, last year, the government made so much incentives to sort of deal with the financial impact of it. The Bank of England, for example, cut down the interest rate to record low of 0.1, which is the lowest they've ever gone to in the 325 years of their existence. Toward the end of last year, the Chancellor of Exchequer made a statement saying that the spending review was said to have been the lowest and the barest minimum in over a lot of years when they look at it, because obviously activity and the spending is what keeps the economy going. So the effect of it is not just on the individuals, it's not just on the family, it's on the society. And the danger of it is if we don't look at a broader picture of it, if we focus just on the individuals, we can't see the long-lasting effect of what this can do in the future, in years to come, even when the pandemic situation has, been resolved. So it goes without saying that we need to put an end to this menace. We need to put an end to this disease. And how do we do that? For diseases in general, what do? We look at how to cure the disease if we can, but if we can't cure it, then we look at how we can prevent it. So when we talk about curing disease, curative mechanisms, so we look at treatment options. And because COVID-19 is a viral illness caused by SARS-CoV-2 virus, which is a type of coronavirus, we know that most viral illnesses do not have a cure. They only have, symptom control over, you can treat the symptoms. So, and then we look at what other ways can we end this menace. So the government introduced so many measures. We talk about, self-isolation. We talk about, wearing face mask, washing your hands, doing all these things, and we talk about lockdown. But that is not enough. That's not going to put an end to it completely. So the best shot we've had at this so far is the development of vaccination. And what is vaccination? We'll go into that in a minute. But before we go into that, I want to make this as simple and as, relatively broken down as possible. So I'm just going to tell a little story, which is completely unrelated to coronavirus. But if you follow the concept of this story, then you would understand why we're where we are today. So there was a little village, and in this village, they're all blind, okay? And the village is such that they've never had thieves in there before. They've never had anybody coming to take anything from them. So they have an open door policy, nobody had to secure their belongings or anything. There are visitors coming around, and they also have a policy where if somebody comes around to visit, you take them with you wherever you go. You take them to the farm, you take them to your workplace, you take them to your market, you take them to friends and families. So from another village, someone came who happened to be a thief. So remember, this is a concept that they never understood in this village where they were all blind. So the thief came from another place, visited one guy, realized that all the food in the household was left open for him. And then he packaged all the food. Obviously, this guy was blind, so he didn't see that the thief was doing that. He took the thief, naturally as they would, to other places where they would go. So the thief did the same to another person, to another person, to another person, and then ransacked quite a few people. After he left town, they discovered that, hang on a minute, a lot of people have lost quite a lot of things. How did this happen? Then they started thinking, oh, Could it be some of these visitors that we've had who are now coming to take things from us? Then they started trying to notice what are the characteristics? How do we know who these visitors are? So they suspected that, well, it might be some of these visitors who come in, and when they come in, they laugh in a certain way. You know, they are so fast and swift, and then they want to disappear as quickly as possible. So those are the symptoms that they attributed to these thieves. And then they said, if you have anyone coming to visit you who has any of these characteristics, you can't see them, but if they start laughing hysterically or they do, all sort of things like that, don't leave your house. Keep them in your house. They only come for 10 days. After 10 days, they go back to where they've come from. So even if they've stolen from you, they're not going to go from house to house to steal from other people. So that was one way in which they wanted to, help with this condition. But sadly, what happened? So there are three categories of people that these thieves started stealing from. They stole from the very rich, who probably didn't even notice they've stolen from them. So they were absolutely fine. They stole from the average young person who, even though they stole from them, they were able to get out quickly, get more food, get more things for survival, so they didn't die. And then they stole from people who are really unwell, who are elderly, who are lonely. And those ones, unfortunately, because they didn't have the energy to do all sort of things around, they naturally died. And then the thieves realized that, these lonely elderly people and the sick people, they're the low-hanging fruits. So when they come around again, they target those ones first. So they get a lot of things from those ones. Those ones died. Some people didn't die. And then after a while, the village chief said to them, okay, this is getting too much. Everybody, what we're going to do is, even if somebody comes to you, whether you know it or not, what you're going to do is when you go out to other people, don't go into their house. If you want to visit your neighbor, stay outside, talk to your neighbors from outside so that your visitor doesn't go into their house so that they don't steal from them. When you go out, make sure your hands are folded in this manner, such that if you fold your hands and if your visitor folds their hand, even if they are thieves, they won't be able to steal from other people. So they try to reduce the incidence of stealing in that way, and that reduced it a little bit further. After a while, this was still ongoing, and then the village chief said, "Okay, hang on, everybody stay in your house." Whether you have visitors or not, whether you have anybody in your house or not, just stay in your house, don't leave your house. And that's how best they could contain, the process of the thieves moving around from house to houses. Then after a while, the elders in the village, they noticed one thing. They said, some of the people who've had these thieves in their house, they've developed a natural process, an instinct. You remember they had no concept of thieves, so they didn't secure anything they had before. But those that have been stolen from, who survived it, they had a natural instinct where they put all their valuables and their food in a secure cupboard, so that when any visitor comes to them, either the visitor is a thief or not, the visitor doesn't get to where the valuables are, so they're protected. Well, because these visitors can still move with them to other places. If they move with them, they move to places where other people who don't have that previous experience can still be stolen from. And then the elders, they said to themselves, what we should do is to get everybody to have this kind of protection, that these people that have been, traumatized by the experience before, their natural instinct where they protect their belongings, let's make an artificial safe and put in the house of everybody, such that when everybody has this safe, they put all their valuables in there, such that even when the thieves come around, they can't steal from everybody else. But they know realistically, it's not everybody that will be able to have that safe. So they said to themselves, it doesn't even matter if it's everybody. If 80 to 90% of us can have a safe in our house, and those who have had a previous experience, they have a safe that they've made for themselves, apart from the artificial one that we've given to them. So if everybody, like 90% of us, can have a safe in our house, what will happen is that when these thieves come around, they try to steal from this house, they couldn't get anything. They try to steal from the next house, they couldn't get anything. After a while, the thieves will stop coming because the village is no longer a lucrative place for them, so they can't get in. And remember, it's not everybody that has it, but thieves have moved from house A, B, C, D. didn't get anything. Before it gets to the 10th person, it's given up, it's gone back because it only has a small duration of time to spend there. So it's given up. So the idea was that even if everybody doesn't have the safe, if 90% of us, 80 to 90% of us can have the safe, then it will protect all of us, including those who don't have the safe, from this thief. And that was how the whole village, combated the stealing and the thieves that came around to them. That story leads us back into COVID-19. So the concept of the vaccination that we want to talk about today is the concept of having an artificial protection that affords us the ability to be able to ward against COVID-19 when it comes to us. Now, this takes me into what I've just explained, and in medicine, we call it herd immunity or community immunity. And this simply means a level of immunity that is offered to the general populace when a large percentage of the population is protected against a particular disease. And what happens in that situation is that because a large proportion is protected, that protection makes the disease to die a natural death because the rate of infection and the rate of disease, manifestation is reduced, thereby reducing the risk of transmission. So that those who are vulnerable, who don't even have that immunity, for example, babies, for example, severely immunocompromised people who can't mount up immune response, those people will still be protected because 90% of the people are protected. Now, that concept comes from the fact that this virus can only replicate itself or reproduce itself in the human cell. Viruses, they survive a little time outside the human cell. So they need to latch on the host. So if the host has antibodies that combat them and fight them, what happens is they die a natural death and they have less chances of moving around. And that is the concept of why vaccination is developed. So let's talk about how different vaccinations, particularly relating to COVID, has come into play. Now, we have different types, and in the UK, we know that there are 3 major types that are available in the market, but mostly 2 are given. So we have the one manufactured here, which is called, the AstraZeneca from Oxford, and then we have 2 other which are, imported, which is the Pfizer and the Moderna. But basically, the ones that are commonly used are the Pfizer and the AstraZeneca. Now, how are these vaccines produced? So vaccines, when you want to produce a vaccination, it has to undergo rigorous tests and rigorous scrutiny and rigorous, safety checking. What happens is each vaccine has to have, we know vaccines has been around for a long period of time, a very, very long period of time, used for different diseases. All the childhood, immunizations that we have today, for measles, for polio, for, rubella, they are all made from vaccinations. Now, what scientists have done is that they realize that we need to get something to protect everybody from the effect of COVID-19. So they developed the vaccination. And how are they developed? In general principle, vaccines would contain what we call an antigen. So antigen is the main ingredient of any vaccination. It's the active product from the disease-causing organism. So that active product is not a full form of the disease, of the virus. It's not like a live form of it that will be enough to trigger a disease, but it is used in different ways. So for example, they can have a modified form where it's a partial part of the virus that is taken. So they can take some protein cells from the virus and attach it to something, which is what they use in the principle of the Pfizer and the Moderna, which is what is referred to as the messenger RNA. So they took a little bit of the protein from it, and then they added some other ingredients to it so that when this vaccine is introduced into the human cell, the principle is that they introduce it to the human cell. Now the introduction, the body recognizes it as the virus causing the disease, and then the body mounts up an immune response to fight it. But of course, it's not the live vaccine that will, it's not a live virus that will cause the whole disease. So it won't cause the disease for the individual. but the body will mount up, a response to fight it. And once the body mounts up that antibody, the antibody are kept in the human cell because they have what we call a memory cell. They're kept in the human cell such that when next in the future the real disease comes, those antibodies that you've previously produced can then fight the disease itself. And thereby you won't manifest with the disease. So that's the general principle of all vaccinations. You trigger an immune response, you produce an antibody, and then the antibody is stored for the future use, such that when you get exposed to the disease, then you don't get the disease. So that's the general principle. Now, going back to the production of vaccines that I was saying, so you have the major ingredient, which is the antigen. Then you have quite a lot of other things that are put into place in the production of the vaccination. So you have, what we call a diluent, which is something to mix it. We have stabilizers, which prevent it from, getting denatured when it is being used. We have things that we call surfactants, which is something that will prevent it from crystallizing out. So they put various things, but all these other things, they are usually constant because they're using all other vaccinations that have been produced. So the major thing that will be different is the concept of the antigen or how they develop the antigen for that vaccination. I'm mentioning all this because people have said, most vaccines in the past, it took quite a lot of years before they were produced. How come this one took a very small time? Is it because they haven't taken time to go through, the process properly? No, because the simple reason is because most things that are needed in the vaccine, they are already in existence. And what's needed to be added to it was the antigen. And it didn't take long to identify the antigen because of the pandemic situation. A situation where you already have loads of people infected with the condition, it is easy to get a lot of people, that has already had exposure to get the antigen. It wasn't difficult. Now, that happens in the lab. So when they produce a vaccine, there are two things on their mind. It must be safe and it must be effective. So safety is the paramount thing. If the vaccine is not safe, no matter how much antibody it can produce, they're not going to use it. So they must make sure that what you didn't have before you took the vaccine, you shouldn't have after taking it. So they'll look at side effect profiles, what can it cause, what are the things that you can have from taking it. Then they talk about the efficacy, which I would call the effectiveness. So efficacy is divided into two, and we have to be careful about how we use the terminology, but I would explain it in simple terms. So how effective is this vaccine in preventing the disease? And how effective is this vaccine in preventing an infection? There are two different things. Prevention of the disease means when you have an exposure to the vaccine, you come down with symptoms, and that's the disease. Prevention of the infection is, can the vaccine actually get into you? So people can be infected, but not have the disease. And that's the concept of what we call asymptomatic carriers. So vaccines, can the vaccine prevent the infection? That is, can you actually get the virus at all? Or can the vaccine actually prevent you from having the disease? That even if you have the virus, do you come down with the illness? So those are the things that they look at. So when they looked at how they want to achieve that, they tested in animals first. So they use animals to check the side effect profiles to see if they mount up the immune response that is needed. And then they go into testing of different phases in humans. So phase one, a small proportion of individuals, healthy adult individuals who don't have the disease, who volunteer to go through the test is the phase one. So they take a small proportion and give the vaccine to them. They want to monitor the side effect profile, so the safety of it, and then they want to see what dose is required to actually bring an immune response in this person, and how long does it take to bring an immune response, and how many doses do we need? So they check all those things. So when they do it in a small proportion of people, very small, if they say that actually this thing is safe in human and we can achieve what we want, Then they roll it out on a larger scale, which is phase two. So phase two, what they do is they have hundreds of people who would, volunteer in that. But in that one, how it's different from phase one is that they're not just looking for healthy adults, they're looking for a general cohort of what would be in the outside world. So people of different ages, people of different, sex, racial background, health background, who would then have exposure, because these are the people in real life who would have the vaccination. So they do it on a slightly larger scale, and then they check the same thing. But when they do phase two, they put some people as what we call control. So control means they're not going to give you the vaccine, but they want to see whether those who had the vaccine had a different outcome from those who didn't have the vaccine. So that's how you can tell that whatever the outcome is was actually due to the vaccine, not that it was going to happen irrespective. But they don't tell them which group you belong to. So that's what you call a blind study. So even people who are doing the research wouldn't know from the onset, so they do what we call a double blind study. So the researchers would prevent themselves from knowing the category of people who wouldn't have the vaccine and who would have what we call a placebo. And then the individuals having it wouldn't know as well. So they study them and they see, so when they have an outcome that is satisfactory, then they move it to phase three, which is a larger scale. So they go on to thousands of people. And in that situation, they test exactly the same principle on a larger scale. And then they have, because, in statistics, the more the number, the higher the significance of your results. So the result done over thousands is statistically more significant than the result done with 100 people. So when they do it with like 60,000 people, then they can say, actually, this is what is likely to happen when we roll it out. So when something has gone through phase three, then it becomes eligible to be used for the general populace in the community. It would then have to go through another rigorous process, which is, so remember, all this phase 1 to 3 that I've described, they're done by the manufacturers, those who are producing the medicine. When they've done that, they will then apply to each country through their regulatory body. So in UK, we have what we call the MHRA, which is the Medicine and Health Protection Regulatory Agency. So they regulate anything that is in the market, from simple things like paracetamol, ibuprofen, alcohol for kids, to chemotherapies, to everything. They regulate all medications. So this drug company will then apply to the MHRA, and they will undergo rigorous scrutiny and process to check the safety, the efficacy, and the side effect profile, and a lot of other host of things through this independent body. They are completely independent from the manufacturers. And when they feel that, yes, this thing has gone through the process, it is safe, it is effective, then they can then agree to market it in that company, in that country, to use it. Now, for vaccinations, so that's for general medicines, yeah? For vaccinations, it then has to go through another committee. For UK, it is called the Joint Committee for Vaccinations and Immunizations. Those ones are the ones that will then determine, okay, who are the people that we want to give it to first? Who are the people that are mostly at risk? How do we want to roll it out? So we can see that they are complete independent bodies that are working in different areas before it gets out to you and I. And then this Joint Committee on Vaccinations and Immunization then roll out a paper, give it to the government and say that, okay, based on our findings, based on statistics, based on the prevalence of this disease, we feel the people that are mostly at risk that needs to get this thing first are the people in this category. So for these COVID vaccinations, so there are people who work in care homes or people who live in care homes. There are people who have solid organ transplants, people over the age of 80, or who have extremely severe long-term conditions. So those ones, they put them in the first category first, or people who have had immunotherapy or chemotherapy or radiotherapy for cancer treatment. So those are the highly vulnerable ones. So they've done that in the UK. They've targeted all the highly vulnerable ones. Then they move to the next category of the people that needed it. So people who are like health workers, social care workers, people who have long-term conditions but are not as severe as the one in category 1, the lesser age group, so they move into 70 and above, then gradually reducing to 60 and above, to 55 and above. So it's going down the ladder like that to encompass, the next high-risk category. Then from there, then it will go to all the general adults. So the idea is those that are highly at risk first, those that are like the low-hanging fruits. Remember the story of the thieves in the village, the low-hanging fruits that they were targeting. Those ones are the ones that they gave the safes to first. So these are the ones that got the vaccines first. The next one are the ones who are under that category. So the whole idea is that over time, most people would have the protection from having the vaccination. Realistically, we know that everybody wouldn't have it. Babies would not be given this COVID vaccination as now. Even now, anybody over the age of 18 is not currently advised to have the vaccination. It's more for adults over the age of 18. So because it's not been trialed in children. But they will be protected if all the adults that needs to have the vaccination has had it. So let's look at UK, for example. The population of UK is about 66 to 67 million. The adults is about a little over 50 million. So the target is that for us to achieve what we call the herd immunity, which is what I defined earlier, for us to achieve herd immunity, we must make sure that at least 80% of the adults have had the vaccination. To have this vaccination at least 80%, it means 40 out of 50 million adults should have the vaccination. And the government is on course, is on target, and they are, they've put different timelines as to, by so time we should achieve this, by so time we should achieve it. As at 1st of March, they've given well over 20 million first dose of vaccinations, to people. The second dose is a lot less because obviously you need an interval between the first and the second dose, but it's still on course. What we don't want to do is to just have a unnecessary, unrealistic fear about the vaccination so that when we're offered, we're declining it. It'll be sad and pathetic that people decline to have it because you're not protecting just yourself alone. Remember the story, you're protecting yourself and you're protecting people around you, because the idea is that when you're vaccinated, even if you're exposed to the virus, you don't catch the disease or you don't have a severe form of the disease. And thereby, the virus cannot replicate itself in you because it's captured. And then the risk of transmission to others is reduced because you've been vaccinated. So that's the concept of how we all need to look at it and to see, how important it is for us to have the vaccination. Now, I'm just conscious of time. It's 20 to 5. I wonder if we should entertain questions at this stage and see, what specific questions people might have, and then, take it up from there.
Okay, we did have a few questions. One of it has to do with faith. So I'm going to put you on the spot by saying, how has your faith had an impact on your decision to get the vaccine? Because most videos that we've seen that have been going around, some were saying it's the mark of the beast, it's 66, it's this, it's that. Some even said there's a microchip in the vaccine. So I'm going to put you on the spot by asking, how has your faith had an impact on the decision of taking the vaccine?
Yeah, thank you. Very good question. So it's not just the vaccination, it's about the principle of things like this in general. So I take medicine if I need to take medicine. I treat people if I feel they need treatment, but I'm a believer, so I also pray as well. For COVID vaccination, having an understanding of how vaccines work, the principles of the development of vaccine, the need for the development of the vaccine, and the rigorous scrutiny and processes that vaccines take before they become available, and looking at how independent these processes are, there is no conspiracy in how one part of the manufacturing is going to be, conspiring with the other part of the licensing and with the government part in various countries all at once. So for my medical knowledge and the understanding of how it is being produced and how it works, I have no reason to believe that this is different from any other vaccination that's been available in the market, because it's the same principle of production of it and other vaccinations we've always accepted. So, you know, measles vaccinations, like I said, even yellow fever vaccination, you want to travel to some countries, you would have to have a yellow fever vaccination. You don't know the contents of it. You took it with faith. I took it with faith. Now, the same concept and processes of developing these vaccinations are the same processes that are used in my own understanding, medical knowledge, of how the COVID vaccination is produced. So I have no reason to believe it's got anything to do with a mark of the Antichrist or indeed with having any microchip. So personally, that is my take on it. And I realize that there are a lot of anxieties, but a lot of these things are unfounded. A lot of them are rumors. A lot of them, we have to remember, with the development of social media, things spread rapidly like wildfire. Somebody just needs to start something and then it goes around. And because it's a new condition completely that is evolving and people are getting to know, people absorb information as much as it comes to them, and they spread it as much as it comes to them, just like the disease is spreading itself. So somebody makes up a story and says, no, why should this thing be this? It must be a mark of this. Everybody takes it without actually questioning it, without actually saying, why do you think it is a mark of the Antichrist? Why do you think it contains a microchip? I personally don't believe it has anything to do with that.
Thank you so much for that. So there's an article that we saw where someone sent an article to us where it says that that some mammograms pick up swelling due to the COVID-19 vaccine. Is that possible?
Well, I would say what is known and what has been published in literature is the fact that COVID-19 vaccination, particularly the Pfizer and the Moderna, is known to cause lymph node enlargement, and the AstraZeneca causes it more, a lot less likely. So the Pfizer one causes lymph node enlargement, and a lot of the things, so we have lymph nodes draining different parts of the body. So in the armpits, you have a lot of lymph nodes there related to the breast tissue, going into that place. You have lymph nodes in the neck related to, if you have tonsillitis, you can have lymph nodes and glands. A lot of people would have experienced that before. So when you have the COVID-19 vaccination, especially the Pfizer or the Moderna, it's been seen as one of the side effects where you can have lymph nodes around the axilla, which is the armpit. And when you have it, then it can affect the drainage of things from the mammary gland, and it can come in, if you do a scan of the mammary gland around the time that you have the lymph node. The lymph nodes are noted, researchers have seen that they're not sustained, they're only there for a considerably short period of time. So it is not a long-lasting side effect that is going to cause cancer. It's certainly not known to cause any cancerous cells.
Okay, so having said that about the side effects, what other side effects would people get when they have the vaccine?
Right. So if we talk about side effects, they can be divided into three. So you have the local side effects, you have the systemic side effect, and then you have the severe ones. So local ones, meaning the site of vaccination, you can have redness, swelling, and pain, at the site of injection in the arm. So those are the local side effects, and that's very common with pretty much every injection or every vaccine. And then you have the systemic side effects, meaning things that can affect the whole system. So you can have fever, you can have joint aches, you can have aches and pains, you can have headache, you can have nausea and vomiting. So these are systemic effects, and they are also relatively very common with most types of vaccinations. And it doesn't mean that it is specifically related to COVID. They are due to how the body forms the immune response when trying to mount up an immune response to fight the virus and developing their own antibody. Now, then you have the very, very rare side effects rare side effects like, what we call anaphylactic reaction, or severe allergic reaction. So these types are the ones that people get when they react to an active ingredient in the vaccine itself. Um, so it is not necessarily because the vaccine is toxic, but it is because their body contains something that reacts severely to them. And that's a very rare case. It probably is 1 in 100,000 people, or a lot even less than that. But that is not only restricted to COVID vaccination, it is indeed with every medicine. People can take penicillin, for example, and have severe anaphylactic reactions because they are allergic to penicillin. So it is a concept that occurs when the body reacts to something. So I won't say it has anything to do with COVID specifically, but it's just a concept of vaccination. But like I said, that is also extremely rare.
Okay, so people have got that kind of condition that they react that badly. Do they need to speak to the doctors and GPs before they actually take the
Absolutely.
vaccine?
So if anyone has had, any severe allergic reaction to any medication before they have the COVID vaccination, they should speak to their doctor. I mean, this would form part of the basic questions that you get asked before you get given the vaccination anyway, because they ask a lot of questions about, your history, what medication you're taking, and what previous experiences you've had with any vaccination.
Okay, thank you. So another question we had is, will it be mandatory for everyone to have the vaccine? Will it be mandatory? So, for example, people working in NHS, for example, will it be mandatory for them, or will it be mandatory for everyone in the UK to have the vaccine? We have a, like you mentioned, when people are traveling, that's present a card to show that they've had the vaccination. So, would it be something like that in the near future?
So there's been a lot of debate around that, whether it's going to restrict, activities. So there are two ways. It could be an incentive such that if you've had a vaccination, you're eligible to do this, you're eligible to do that. If you don't have the vaccinations, then you may not be able to travel, for example, to certain places. You may not be able to go into places, crowded places like a football stadium or something like that. So that way, although they're not making it mandatory, but because there are restrictive factors that are put in place, then indirectly it becomes more or less mandatory, but it's still optional. So if you choose not to travel, if you choose not to go to places like that, they may not force you to have the vaccination, but you may need to have it to do the things that you would want to do.
Okay, cool. So we know that there's I don't want to use the word illegal immigrant, but I have to use it to be political correct. That's the word to use. So for people like that, because this is a pandemic, and I know that the government will want to reach out to everyone, how can people like this get the vaccine? So, some of them don't even have records with the GP. So how can they get the vaccine?
So very good question. So the categorization of the at-risk people is originally based on the data that is available with your GP where you're registered. Now the question comes to those who are not registered, how do they have access to it? So there is no restriction. So no, they don't check immigration status or anything when you need to have the vaccination. Like you rightly said, this is a pandemic situation. Everyone needs to be protected because if they segregate those ones and don't give them the vaccination, they might be the one that will continue to spread the infection. So because there is a public health interest, everyone is eligible to have the vaccination when it is their turn. So anyone over the age of 65, for example, at the moment, would have it irrespective of their immigration status, or anyone younger with chronic medical condition. There are places where you can connect to, it could be a place of worship. So there are charitable organizations, that are registered that can give you access to having the vaccination. In fact, sometimes you can actually go online and just check for, COVID vaccination eligibility, and you put your details and it can give you options of where you can have the vaccination, because it's not just done in your GP surgery. There are pharmacies, there are vaccination centers all around. So you can have it through a center where, for example, your church can channel you as to where you can have it, if you register your interest with your church, or you can actually do this individually by going online to check your eligibility. So eligibility is in relation to your health, not your status.
Okay, thank you. So another question. So you've mentioned the three types of the vaccine that we've got in the UK. So for the AstraZeneca is the common one here, and which is what was mainly given to people in the UK. But for someone that is actually working in the UK but living in another country, would that kind of cover them, especially if they have other vaccine that they use in the country that they normally live in? Would they, if they, for example, have been given the AstraZeneca one, would that cover them if they move back to where they normally reside?
Yeah. So each of the vaccine is designed to cover most strains of the COVID-19. So irrespective of where you go, the vaccine that you have, either it's Pfizer or it's AstraZeneca, it is expected that you provide a significantly high degree of protection against the strain of the COVID-19 in the country that you go to. So it doesn't matter where you go or where you are, it will still be far, far better to have one type of vaccination than not have any at all. But it might be reasonable for somebody who lives abroad to live, to have the vaccination in their country of residence rather than in the UK if they spend more time in that place.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So Lou, do we have any questions from our live audience?
Yeah, we have one, I think, but I have one that I wanted to ask, one or two. I wanted to ask, so how long does it cover you for? So if you take, I know that the government has said that you should have a 3 month booster after the first one, I believe. So how long does that cover you for? Is it like the flu vac that you have to keep taking every year, or do we know how long? Or is the data still being developed on that one?
So there's still a lot of ongoing research and activity that is looking at how long it lasts for. Remember, this was only produced late last year. So no one has had the vaccination for a year, if we put it that way. So the earliest would be from towards the end of last year. So, but it is expected that with the way it works, it is going to provide a long-lasting effect, and it wouldn't necessarily be like the flu vaccination where you have to have a different one every year. The main reason for the flu vaccination where you have to have a different one is that the strain of the flu virus is different every year. So the one that you had last year may not necessarily protect against the strain that is coming this year. So they look at the strain around the time earlier, just before the vaccine is produced, and then they produce a type of vaccine that will be specific for that strain. And that is only limited to some very, very small proportion of, viral condition. A lot of majority of the vaccinations we have, you have one dose, sometimes you have a booster, and then after you have that, then it provides a long-lasting effect, which may be years, maybe 5 years. Sometimes they may say after 10 years, you need to have another one. But it is hope, and the hope and anticipation is that by the time it's years and years to come, the virus would have died a natural death because it can't survive outside the host. So it's not replicating itself. So there won't be any need for it in the future. So while it is not certain how long it lasts for, it is thought that it would last a considerable length of time that you won't need to have it yearly.
Okay, thanks. That's quite reassuring. Although that leads me to another quick question that we've heard about, the Brazilian strain, I don't know, the South African strain or something. So, I mean, is that been taken into effect with the one that's been developed? Does it cover all of that as well? All of those strains?
So researchers have looked at the existing vaccinations that we have, and they've seen that, all the different strains. Remember, these strains are not a completely different virus. They're just a slight manifestation in a different way of the same virus. So they've seen that all the vaccinations that have been produced and in existence and available in the UK today, they protect to different degrees against all these other strains. Now, the level of protection that they offer may differ. So, for example, the Pfizer may offer up to 90%, I'm just using the figure, so yeah, 90% protection against the Brazilian strain, and the AstraZeneca offers 85% protection. But it is not that any of the strains is resistant to any of the vaccines that we have.
Okay, and I have a personal one, and that's probably because of my background, and it might be a silly, fear, but I've heard one or two people say that before. Okay, I have a background in microbiology and biotechnology, and so when I heard mRNA, my mind was like, oh my God, something floating around in my body is going to mutate over a few years. It's going to start causing some form of mutation. I don't want stuff floating around in my body. So is that a valid fear or not?
It's a valid question, but not a valid fear. Now, the reason is this. So the RNA, so the messenger RNA, what the process is that? So a certain part of the protein is used to carry so it's just acting as a vehicle into the human body. Now, the RNA is different completely from the DNA. So your DNA is where your gene lies, and that is where the core of your being is. So the virus, the vaccine that is transported into the body in form of the RNA in the, for example, looking at the Pfizer and the Moderna, that we know that their process is through the principle is through the messenger RNA. Those messenger RNA, all they do is to act as a transport medium into the body. They don't clinch to the DNA of the individual, so they cannot modify your DNA. So all they do is get into the body, they stimulate the body to produce, antibodies, immune response of the body, and then they are captured. So they are not staying in your system for long. And because they're not staying there and they're not binding with your DNA, they can't alter anything in your system.
Phew, thank you. Okay. We have someone who's asked, and I'm not sure if you've answered this. She said, why was the COVID vaccine given according to age groups, with the elderly given first and now middle age groups? I think you've touched on that, but yeah, someone's just asked again.
Yeah, so it could be that the person missed that part of the presentation. So the reason is that those are the more vulnerable. So their immune system is not as strong as a young, healthy, fit adult without any underlying medical condition. The older you get, the less likely it is that your body's immune system will be able to fight different infections that come. And we can see from evidence that, most people that died from the condition are the elderly people. So because they are the ones that are most vulnerable, they are the ones that we need to protect first. So we're protecting them for themselves, but because they are also the most vulnerable, they are the ones that are likely to transmit it because the virus can replicate quite rapidly in them. So the transmission from them is higher. So remember, the more immune your system is, the less likely you are to come down with the disease, and the less likely you are going to be able to transmit it because your body would have fought the virus quickly. So the longer the virus stays in your system, the more likely you are able to spread it. So because these people are the most vulnerable in terms of non-mounting immune response, we need to get them first, get them protected so that they have an artificial way of fighting it and containing the disease for themselves, but not only for themselves, but by preventing them from spreading it as well. So that's why it's gone in that order. So remember, I said, people in nursing home and people who work in nursing homes. So even if you're 25 and you work in a nursing home, because you work with the elderly, if you have it, you can spread it around in the nursing home. And if they have it, they can give it to you, you can spread it around in the community. So people in the nursing home, they are the most, at risk, then, over 80, then coming down with age and coming down with medical problems and that.
Right.
That's true, because I know also room-bound elderly in care homes that picked up the COVID virus, whereas how can they get it? They only get it from their carers. So it makes sense doing it that way. I think we got more questions, Tolu.
Yeah. Timothy Damilare Falola, thanks for your question. And the question is, after receiving, I think that's what he's trying to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, not receiving it. After receiving the vaccine, is there any tendency for the virus mutating to another virus or the possibility of showing the symptoms of the virus again?
So after receiving the vaccination, the main principle of why we're being vaccinated is such that we're prevented from having the disease. So the idea is that if you have the vaccination, you shouldn't come down with disease. But in the unlikely event that you do come down with a disease because you couldn't mount up enough immune response, you're going to come down with a very mild form of the disease. So the virus that goes into your system, when it's in your system, cannot mutate in your system. Virus can mutate, they can mutate when they're already being fought by the antibodies in your system. They can mutate when they have a free space to mutate and change their forms and things like that. But when you already have the vaccination, that process is extremely unlikely to happen inside the person.
Yeah, fantastic.
Oh.
I think that's the last.
We had one as well. Someone that asked, why does the booster dose of the vaccine cause effects to some people like headaches, aches, and pain? So I think it's generally, like you said before, that this is down to, when people have other form of vaccine as well, they normally tend to react that way. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the other thing to sort of look at from that viewpoint is the second dose. So your body is already sensitized from the first dose. You've already mounted some level of immune response. The second dose is to increase your level of immunity. So your body already knows that there is a danger in this thing. So when you have it, in the process of attacking what you're having, then you can then develop the side effects, which are the things that would happen in the process of you mounting up your immune response. So those are, the headaches, the aches and pains. And like I said, it's not just with COVID-19, it's with most vaccinations.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Lay. So do we have any other further questions?
I think that's all the questions on here. Although I had a question. I remember it now. It seems that this, using mRNA and using the vector and all that is a quicker, more effective way to introduce vaccines and create vaccines. So why hasn't this been done? Because we've had vaccines for a long time. I know that this is sort of a newer kind of way of creating vaccines. So why is it because of the speed that this was needed? And probably that we never needed that, and so we never had to go down that route.
Yeah, so that's a good question. Now, the use of viral vector or the use of a messenger RNA, it's not completely new to COVID-19 alone. It's recent, so it's not been around for 50 years or 40 years, but it's very recent. But it's not that it was just discovered last year. Now, why this has gone at such a high speed, it's multifactorial. So there is a lot of, let's look at it from the economic point of view. There's a lot of public interest in it, government interest, financial interest. So a lot of money got pumped into making this vaccination, into the research of it. For a lot of vaccines that are produced over the years, the approval to get the funding, the approval to get this takes a long period of time. But because we can see the effect, the drastic effect that it is discussing, so there's a lot of interest to say how much, no matter how much we need, we're going to pump all the money into it to get it done. So that's from the political aspect of it. Then number two, because a lot of people are already coming down with the active disease already, at the time that the vaccine is produced, it is easy to get the antigen in various forms that are needed. So there's no need to sort of, wait for one person in one country to have the disease and wait for. So to get 60,000 people was just like that. to get 100,000 people was just like that. So because it is active, it is here with us. So getting everything that you need is actually quite easy. And then because of, obviously, as you rightly said, technological advancement has improved a lot of things. So the way in which the vaccine is produced now is different from the concept of how it would have been done, 30 years ago. So a lot of factors played into how this one was made available quite quickly. But let's not forget, this is not the first time a vaccine is quickly made available. If we remember swine flu was about 10 years ago. It didn't take 20 years to produce the vaccination. It didn't take 10 years. It only took a year to produce a vaccination for swine flu as well. So technological advancement, and that's what I mean by the public and the social media interest. Nobody questioned why swine flu vaccinations was quickly produced at that time. But because of a lot of, myth, a lot of, social media, stories going around, they are saying, oh, why is it being produced? Oh, nobody produces it. But no, actually, this is not the first time. It has happened before.
Mm.
Oh,
Thank you very much. That's very informative. Thank you. I think we're out of time.
We've got one last question. So someone just said, with people that has or had underlying health issues, how fast can they fight the viruses? Are the masks, sanitizers preventive enough? If you take multivitamins like the vitamin C, vitamin D, and zinc, would that help? Eating fruit, vegetables, would that help? We've got a lot of videos as well flying around asking people to take vitamin C, lemon, ginger, zinc, eating veg, eating fruit. So what do you think about that?
So in principle, those things, all they simply do is to boost your body's ability to mount up immune response. And then they help you to form what we call antioxidants that fight against, viruses and a lot of other illnesses as well, so that your cells are quite healthy and they can mount up and fight stuff when they come. So by all means, they are really good things to take, but it doesn't necessarily mean they translate directly into a curative process for COVID-19. They help to boost your general immune response. So even if you have things like common cold, they help you to fight it better. If you have anything, they help you to fight it better because your immune system can mount up response quite quickly. So it is good to take supplements like vitamin D, vitamin C, and magnesium and zinc. Those are nutritional vitamin supplements that help to boost your immune system. And eating fruits definitely comes from another way of boosting it. Exercising regularly, doing all sort of things that keeps your body healthy helps you to improve it as well. Now, for people who have underlying health issues, they can mount these things less rapidly than people who don't have underlying health issues. So they're actually more at risk of the disease, and that's why it's more important for them to have the COVID-19 vaccination. Obviously, speak to your GP to get some advice on that, but it is more important for them to have it.
I'm going to put you on the spot, Dr. Laye. Have you had your vaccine, and how long ago did you have yours?
Absolutely, good question. So I had my first dose first week in February, so it's like a month now, and I'm waiting to have my second dose.
Okay, so that gives me assurance. I can see your wall, your feet, and everything. So yeah, that gives me assurance. I get it. There's no side effects. Don't mind me.
Good question.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Laye. You've actually covered a lot. And I hope that people that would listen to this and people that would watch the replay would actually, get a lot out of this. It's been really educating. So Lou, as usual, I think we've run out of time, but it's something that we just need to do.
We have. Thank you so much to everyone that stayed until the end. If you're watching this on a replay, just hashtag replay in the comment section so we get to know that more people are watching this even after the live. So thank you so much. God bless you. This is going to be on our page as well. It's not going anywhere. And if you're thinking, oh, that charity, probably they've given them some money, that's why they're doing this COVID thing. No, I think this is just the way God wants it, because I am one of the first people that'll tell you, nah, I'm not getting that vaccine, all this mRNA thing. But now I'm more enlightened. And so the information that we received has been so good. I can now confidently say, oh, those fears, those myths that I had in my head, they're all gone out of the window. So thank you, Dr. Oginni. That was awesome.
Thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, so thank you, everyone. Thanks for jumping on. A big God bless you. We are a Christian charity, Precious Spell Charity, and we're hosting inspirational moments. We hope to be here, bringing more people by the grace of God. And as God leads us, God is at the heart of everything that we do. God bless you, and see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.